morning, colleagues. Good evening. While we are just settling in, why don't we start our regular greetings through the chat box? Just mention where you're connecting from, and we're about to start in a second. Just giving some seconds for our colleagues to settle down. Greetings to Nepal. We have colleagues connecting from Jerusalem, Istanbul, Singapore, Lesotho, Ethiopia, Cambodia. Greetings to everyone, colleagues. It's great to have you here. Just some housekeeping items before I hand over to our facilitator today. Please mute your microphones during our presentation. We will have time for giving you the floor in the Q&A. Just reminding you that the recording and the presentation and a summary of the Q&A session will be posted in SparkBlue in the link that we're about to send to the chat box. And to please send your comments or questions in advance using the chat box here, so we can make the most of the time during the Q&A session. So with no further ado, welcome everyone to our 9th session of Let's Talk Plastic. We're traveling to the Asia and the Pacific region today. With that, I will hand over to our facilitator, Jaco, to formally start the session. Jaco, the floor is totally yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. I just want to check that Sulani is there. If not, we'll just move to some of the other topics. But just to say, first of all, colleagues, thank you very much. It's great to see so many of you as participants. It's great to see that we have such a wide range of interest from all over the world, and please keep adding your names there to the list and where you're from, because I think what we know about the plastic debate, it's very a contextualized debate. Every country faces different challenges and issues. We learn about many things. In my development work, I think I have this general theory that it's good to share things across the spectrum. You usually can take anywhere from 30 to 40% of the relevant learnings away for your own context, but often the other specifics are very unique to each country. And I think that's what we also appreciate with this efforts and these webinar sessions that we have. There's a lot that we learn that we don't have to reinvent, but there's also a lot that is very contextualized and specific to our ongoing debate. And I think today we have really a wonderful panel that is really going to enlighten us about many things, specifically about the context in Cambodia. We first of all have Alex, who will be talking about the innovation and the systems approach that we've had and the way that we've been dealing with it within Asia Pacific. And then we're going to open it up to a panel. And I think the uniqueness of this panel, it brings together private sector donors, government officials, and also the UNDP efforts together on a common platform. And we're going to debate how and why people are interested and engaged in this debate, which make the Cambodia context quite unique. And therefore we have the first Secretary of the Embassy of Japan, Tohis Kazu Dokoika. We have Miyoko Santo Jensen from UNDP. We have Meng Eng Tang, who is from the government of Cambodia, from the Department of Green Economy. And then we have also Daniela Russo, who's from the Think Beyond Corporation and Beyond Plastic Foundation. And then for final comments, we're also going to have the opportunity to listen from Nick Beresford, who's our resident representative in Cambodia, and also some final takeaways. But I think the important part of this session here today is really that we also want to engage you, the participants. There's lots of questions that might remain, so please feel free to either raise your hand, put the comments in the chat box. If we don't get time to get to all the questions, we've made a commitment here, and we also put it on the SparkBlue platform, that we will get back to you with specific questions, either individually or through the messages and the email registration that you have put up there. So great to have the panel. Thank you very much to everybody for joining. Thanks to everybody for also in Asia Pacific for staying up a little bit late into the evening. This is just the reality we've become used to. If we want to make it a global event, this is the only time that we can also offer some of these sessions so that we can also engage colleagues across the world. Let me just very briefly say that this the session here today is really twofold. One is it sets a context for why it is important that we have a systems approach to the whole plastic debate. Within the plastic development challenges that we are dealing with, not only in UNDP, but I think globally as well, there's a lot of finger pointing often happening. And you know, private sector says that the government don't have enough regulations in place and don't support the way that solutions can be driven. There's a lot of finger pointing, obviously, to private sector and to some of the companies and specifically those that are engaged in utilizing plastics. There's a lot of questions that arise. Why are donors and funders not investing more on this type of initiatives? And then I think within the larger climate agenda, it's also very important that we consider the impact of plastic and how we're also addressing that as part of our larger climate change agenda and impact that it has on the climate and environment. So what we hope to do here today is really share from different perspectives. And I want to thank everybody in Cambodia for really coming together, because for me, the storyline in Cambodia is really that this is a partnership perspective of how not only the government, but also I think the partners, including donors, including partners from the private sector, are working together in a holistic way to also address this very big challenge, not only in the country, but also as a model example for how we can pull different components in the partnership together to really address this constructively. Again, this overall learning webinar and session is for us, I think in UNDP, that we're trying to learn as quickly as we can so we don't have to make the same mistakes that other countries have made. We're also trying to learn from where the solutions are and how people are coming together. And I think what we want to do then is from that learning, as quickly as possible, transform the way and the development solutions that we're often providing then to partners, to governments, and to the private sector and civil society as well. So we look forward to a very engaging debate. First, for the context setting, we will move to Alex, who's also going to say we heard previously from Vietnam in one of the webinar series. But this is something that we're also trying to address through a very systems approach and looking at all the elements that need to be considered within the specific solutions that people are developing. So Alex, let me start and open the floor to you. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jaco, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. As Jaco mentioned, it's a global webinar, so it's spread all over time zones across the globe. And I'm from my regional innovation team from Bangkok Regional Hub, and perhaps one of the questions can be what innovation folks can and want to bring to this discussion. And this is essentially what I will be talking about in the next 10 minutes. But please don't expect floating ocean platforms to collect plastic or talking about apps and this kind of stuff. This is not about it. As Jaco pointed out, we are looking at the system approaches to plastic waste. And I think, well, there are a lot of things why we are looking at systems, and Martin, can be moved to the next slide. There are many reasons to think in terms of why to talk about it in a systems way. One of those, obviously, is just the waste flows are so intertwined across the globe. We know that usually Asia gets most of the blame in terms of, for instance, ocean pollution with plastic. But we also know that, for instance, US exports most of its plastic waste to Asia, right? So it's this kind of a connectivity between different continents. It's really a global issue. Another thing is just we also understand that we cannot, pinpoint this thing just with one sector. And I think where the trend is now going with, for instance, gas and petroleum companies pivoting away from energy sector to plastics. That clearly shows that we cannot deliver on our greening energy commitments or climate commitments without tackling the plastic issue. So with this being said, I think we started our work with the hunches around our contribution based on two important assumptions. The first thing what we saw is that the current development or public policy practice is not always delivering on the expected results. And this is firstly because the plastic pollution is treated as a waste issue. Secondly, because it's seen as a waste management issue, the solutions that are usually proposed are very kind of a single point, segmented, and looking at a particular technical issue of the waste flow, be it technology, be it development of recycling facilities, without actually looking at the through chain. So with this in mind, we wanted to test whether these two key assumptions that kind of undermine efforts around plastic are true. We started our regional project, first of all in Vietnam, and you heard from Vietnam on one of the first sessions, but other countries that are slowly picking up pace in this project are also the Maldives, Pakistan, and we are kicking off the work as we speak in the Philippines. And I think also Daniela will be referring to some aspects of this work. So with this in mind, we try to offer a different method and try to see how this method would work on the issue of plastic pollution and how we can codify it with the perspective to integrate it in the organizational offering around plastic pollution. So Martin, if you can move to the next slide. And in this approach, I think there are three important building blocks. The first one is sense and frame, and I will be referring in more detail to each of the phases. The second one is about engage and position, how UNDP can engage and position differently itself and the whole portfolio work around plastics with its partners, funders, governments, and so forth. And the third one, how we actually can activate whatever we have to propose in our positioning to the external partners to start transforming the way how things are around plastic pollution. Martin, if we can go to the next slide, it will be really telegraphic. I'm constrained by time. So there are two key parts in terms of sensing and frame. The first one where kind of innovation adds to this beyond usual policy research and stakeholder consultation is ethnography. And the purpose of this is essentially to see how different categories of people and stakeholders experience the issue of plastic pollution, and secondly, to unearth certain things that are unseen through the official eyes. So one of the excellent examples that we picked from Vietnam, but also from other countries. The first thing, right, we all know that I guess in half Asian countries, informal waste picking plays an enormous role in plugging the system gaps in terms of waste management, right? So if we look at it, how many policies or how often informal waste pickers are part of stakeholder consultation with the government in terms of addressing waste management issue, bring on board infrastructure and so forth? I'm sure not that much, right? Another point of it, how often we look at the cultural norm around waste in particular locations. Like for instance, in Vietnam, the cultural norm that waste is something dirty. People wouldn't want to be seen as dealing with waste in public. They wouldn't want to open the lid of our traditional segregation bins if it's closed, right? And it has to be closed when it rains. Something that clearly you wouldn't see in a policy or in a kind of a policy research, but something that clearly can undermine an infrastructure investment of millions if we are talking about big cities. So Martin, if you can go to the next slides. I think the key point that I want to drive, what we want to, the value add that we bring to it, is the way how government sees things, right? So we use usually this picture. Governments try to see the reality as a very ordered German forest, right? Where all trees are in line and everything can be reduced to an average. While the massive reality, especially on the issue of the waste pollution, is like this very organic forest, where different households, players, informal waste pickers have very different patterns of behavior. I think if you want something that would hold on the ground, not only as a policy document, but something that can have an effect on ground, this is an important contribution that we bring to this. The second thing that we do in sensing and framing, and Martin, if you can go to the following slide, is actually to understand the system application, right? As I mentioned at the beginning, the issue is that we are very much kind of chasing this waste management thing and trying to address things that are events, that are symptoms of a bigger problem, right? We try to say, oh, there is a leakage of waste, how we can develop an app that will give signal to municipal authority to fix that. Oh, there is a landfill that is falling apart. Can we develop a new landfill? Or can we come with a new technology that will burn burst and transform it into something, right? The problem with that is obviously that I mentioned we miss informality, but the bigger thing is that we are missing the pattern structures and mental models that drive behavior of different players in the system. If you want, the whole system is stacked against sustainability. It's all about disposability. It's all about fast consumption and quick profit generation, right? And the mentality is that the government has to do it. It's not my job. I don't want to see waste. And obviously, with this kind of attitudes, it's very difficult to address the problem, right? We always will be chasing things that are on surface. I will quote one of our counterparts from the Maldives, from Hulumani City Corporation. He said, if the patterns of behavior keep as they are in Mali, right? And Hulumani is artificially recaptured land where the new city is being developed, we will be always losing, because we just cannot keep with infrastructure and with the rest with that. So these points that we need to move to another model, and understanding that we need to walk and look very much on upstream. Martin, if you can move to another slide. I will accelerate now because Martin is showing I'm running out of time. So clearly what we need to bring is to start looking not just at waste management, but the upstream, how we can change patterns of designing, consuming, producing different materials and actually using it. Martin, if you can go to the next slide. If that's true, right, if there's a complex, massive thing, I think we cannot, as I said, address it with a single point solution. What we need is to develop a portfolio of actions that would link different parts of the through chain of plastic from production to disposal, would look at different leverage points from policies and regulations to behaviors, and obviously also to recycling, downcycling, and all that. Martin, can we go to the next slide? And what is important, right? What I'm not trying to say is that we don't need to look at how we manage waste. I think this is where the part of the system work is. But this is also very important that we keep a longer time North Star in terms of how we manage and shift to circularity. Managing waste will not bring us to circularity. Martin, can we skip one slide and go to the another one? So what essentially we see in several countries where we're engaging, we are working on a transition of portfolios, where one would be looking at what we have now and how we improve the current system as it is. The second one is seeding what we actually want to see in the future, how the possible long-term game in terms of circular economy can look like. Martin, can we go to the next slide? Another one, I'm accelerating really. The point here, I think, if that holds true, and if this portfolio and logic holds true, what we really understand is that UNDP or even other just official partners cannot drive it alone, right? What we need is actually to start seeding a movement that would start working on a particular, in a particular jurisdiction. In this case, for instance, we have Da Nang City, Rahim Young Khan in Pakistan. We are working now in Pasig City of Manila Metropole, is to start seeding the local movement towards circularity, the different champions from government to startups to academia, to start changing the narrative and to start bringing new practice afloat. The last slide here, I think. So with this work, I think that was very interesting to start building movement from bottom up. What we suddenly observed, and I think this work just started before I'm closing, Jaakko. This work just started before COVID. Interestingly enough, COVID was in many places is becoming a game changer. Suddenly, circularity becomes not a topic that just discussed with startups or some pockets of academia or some policy circles. It's becoming a mainstream of green recovery. In Vietnam, when we started, there was very little governmental attention in Da Nang or in some other places towards circularity. Now, as with this crisis moment, something that seemed like politically impossible is becoming politically inevitable. The whole national agenda starts shifting to circular agenda, how we support SMEs, other partners in private sector, government, towards transition to circularity. I think this is where our pivot is that the local experience that we have in several cities across Asia and building those portfolios movements will start connecting to those bigger national narrative and bigger national change, right? And in this way, we are providing as an organization a bridge from local experiences that are tested on the ground, that fit the context, to much bigger scaled national context, about which I think colleagues from Cambodia will speak more. Over to you, Jaakko.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you also for that overview. I think it is important that we also set the context both for how how a systems approach can help identify not only the relevant entry points, but also help connect those activities that people are engaged with, whether it's a community, government, or private sector level, into a larger approach that also makes the development impact much more appreciated by all the partners. So without further ado, I'm immediately going to move to our next presenter. And I think we're very lucky to have also the first secretary of the Embassy of Japan in Cambodia, Toshikazu-san, who will be presenting very briefly on Japan's marine initiative. Japan has done a lot of work in terms of also how to tackle some of the challenges around plastic, but also working very closely with the UNDP office within Cambodia on certain initiatives. So over to you, Toshikazu-san.
Okay. Thank you very much. And everyone, good evening and good morning, good afternoons. My name is Tokioka Toshikazu, First Secretary of Japanese Embassy in Cambodia. Actually, I don't have much expertise about marine plastic issues. I am just participating in the field as one of government officials in Japan. So in this point of view, today I am very happy to have an opportunity to introduce one of the Japanese government policy for tackling marine plastic pollution, the Marine Initiative. So would you go to the next slide, please? Yes. First, let me introduce the background of Marine Initiative. In response to the growing attention for the marine plastic issues around the world, on the occasion of the G20 Osaka Summit in June 2019, the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision was shared by G20 leaders. This vision is to aim reducing additional plastic pollution by 2050. Then, toward realization of this vision, our government has launched the Marine Initiative at the G20 Summit. This initiative means taking our government's actions to support developing countries, especially the countries who enjoy rapid economic growth, for their effort in the area of waste management. The Marine Initiative are followed by 3 policies. First, promoting international cooperation through international organizations. And second, promoting international operations by Japanese companies, NGOs, and local governments in Japan. And third, dissemination and sharing of best practices. For the policy first, our government provides financial support, and the international organization provides technical support to the recipient countries. For the policy second, our government encourages Japanese private companies and NGOs and local government to export of waste management related infrastructure and innovation and technology development regarding plastic alternatives and recycling by providing financial support or sharing information to them. So would you please go to the next slide? Yes, this is the official summary published by our government regarding Marine Initiative. So today I'd like to introduce about the policy first in detail. So would you please go to the next slide? Yes, here is a cooperation project with international organizations for multiple countries started after the G20 summit. So in all the projects listed here, our government participates as donor. In the multi-cooperation project, the projects are mainly implemented by research and development or academic approach. So the plastic litter is coming from the big river to the sea. And the big river run across the multiple countries. So it would be necessary to do countermeasures in multiple countries at the same project. But on the other hand, this multiple approach has difficulties to deeply go into each country's countermeasures, such as making regulations or raising public awarenesses. So would you go to the next slide, please? Yes, so our government is also supporting bilateral cooperation project as listed here. In these projects, our partner organizations are providing technical support to the essential countermeasures in each country, such as developing action plan, policy and regulations, and capacity building, and raising public awarenesses. So I think both approaches are very important. Our government supports both R&D and academic approach to the regional level, and the approach to develop essential countermeasures to specific countries. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that outline and presentation. If I can maybe ask a practical question, Toshikazu. Also, you know, there's a lot of people from all over the world sitting here, and they also maybe want to engage or maybe want to talk about certain projects to the government or the embassies in the different countries. What would be the best way to, or how do you think some of these initiatives can also be supported through this initiative from the government of Japan?
Yes, our government through Embassy of Japan around the world are always waiting for the good proposal from the several international organizations. So we are always waiting for the proposal. And when we get the proposal, we will coordinate with our headquarters in Tokyo. This is a usual way to make a project, new project.
Great, and it's very encouraging to hear, and also thank you for that that engagement that you've also shown both with the UNDP countries in Cambodia, but also I think through all the other initiatives and UN efforts that you've mentioned there. And I think you know, some of the information of how to also follow up can be listed in our Spark Blue platform, and people can also follow up there with more details and maybe contact information. So without further ado, let's maybe talk a little bit about how both UNDP and the government in Cambodia is moving forward with this. And for that, we're very lucky to have Meko and Mr. Tang Meng Yang, who will be working and presenting this jointly as an initiative funded by a number of partners, but also what UNDP and the government is currently doing on its systems approach in Cambodia to fight plastic pollution. Over to you, Meko.
Thank you so much, Jaakko. Hello, everybody. My name is Meko Saito Jensen. I'm Environmental Policy Specialist of UNDP Cambodia. I'm going to present jointly with Mr. Meng Yen Teng, Director of the Department of Green Economy, National Council for Sustainable Development, and Project Manager for Combating Marine Plastic Litter Project. We are going to present Cambodia's systematic approach for fighting against plastic pollution. Next, please. So this picture represents Cambodia's ongoing effort to prevent marine plastic pollution. We took this picture during our field visit to one of the coastal cities of Cambodia undergoing rapid economic development. The local government placed this net across the canal running through the city to stop plastic items from flowing to the ocean. While we are there, we saw a constant flow of plastic items being captured by this net. The local government officer mentioned that we, the government, cannot stop marine plastic pollution alone. There is an overwhelming amount of plastic we are dealing with. The business and citizens who generate and dispose plastic waste on street and waterway also need to be involved in joining our fight. So this is happening in the context of rapid economic development and also population growth in Cambodia. This has led to the surge in the volume of plastic waste in the country. Please, next slide. For example, the volume of municipal waste in the capital city of Phnom Penh more than tripled within the 12 years time, from around 350,000 tons to over 1 million tons. Now plastic amounts to 21% of the total municipal waste in Phnom Penh. Next, please. Now, out of the total waste generated, around 63% is collected, while 29% is illegally dumped or burned. At present, informal waste pickers play a very important role in collecting and recycling of waste. In Phnom Penh, there are around 290 depots with around 2,000 people working in the informal waste sector. Next, please. So plastic waste and pollution has given rise to various challenges in Cambodia. One of the challenges is a rapidly growing volume of plastic waste, adding immense pressure on existing landfills. Burning and illegal disposal of plastic waste is also common and also highly concerning in terms of the public health impacts. As for marine plastic pollution, according to FFI, 80% of debris on beach is plastic, including cigarettes, plastic food wrappers, and plastic bags and fishing gears. And many mammals, fish, and birds they suffer and die from ingesting plastic. And there's also a challenge with plastic recycling. The less than 1% of plastic waste is formally recycled by small, medium-scale enterprises in Cambodia. Next, please. So this is in response to the challenge that the Cambodian government introduced the 4R framework. This stands for refuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle plastic waste. Next, please. So according to a the circular economy strategy the Cambodian government has been developing, these are the priority for plastic waste management. Before I go through this waste management hierarchy, I also like to share a quote shared by UNDP colleague from Brazil. To fix a leakage, you first need to close the tap. So following the idea that this waste management hierarchy focus on waste prevention as the most important strategies. So waste need to be minimized at the source. So in order for the Cambodia to do so, the Cambodia is considering to minimize the use of single-use plastic and promoting alternatives. And also considering to introduce an EPR take-back schemes, refueling services. And then the next priority is the collection and sorting of waste. 100% of the plastic waste need to be collected 100% to prevent plastic burning, illegal disposal. And for the plastic that's recyclable can be sent for recycling. And the one that cannot be recycled can be processed through waste energy solution. And the minimum amount should go to disposal to minimize the environmental public health impacts from plastic waste. Next, please. So next I hand over to Mr. Meng Yen to talk about the Cambodia's systematic approach for tackling plastic pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Moiko, for your introduction and mention about the situation briefly in Cambodia. And in Cambodia, we are planning to introduce this kind of systematic approach to tackling the plastic pollution. The diagram you see here, you can see the very bottom is the objective, the overall objective of the government to reduce and recycle the maximum amount of the plastic. With this, we see that the research and development of the policy and regulation are very crucial for to the change of the behavior of the people, mainly to limit the use of single-use plastic, and also to raise the awareness from the public. And we also consider the stakeholder engagement for the implementation of 4Rs, not only from the government itself, but also from the private sectors, citizens, and also the other important key players, such as private business who are doing the good or their own initiative in implementing the good initiative to reduce their plastic from the source. And also we also consider the informal waste pickers who are also doing a crucial role collecting the material that will be enabled for the further recycling. Next, please. From this, we have completed or conducted a few research and developing some policy. You can see here to the regulation. And briefly that we have coordinate or cooperate with a few partners from UNDP to the other partners like World Bank and the other institutions to come up with this research from the global context to the local context here in Cambodia. We can see a few indicative number that we have 10 most commonly founded plastic here in Cambodia in the waterway specifically. And also for the policy part, we also introducing newly what we call the national policy for urban solid waste management for 10 years starting from 2020. And we're also in the process of developing what we call circular economy policy and action plan and the action plan for plastic roadmap. And in 2018, we also introduced the sub-decree we call 168 sub-decree to manage the plastic bag to the customer who consume their goods at the supermarket. And also, lastly, we are in the process of drafting the sub-decree on plastic waste management as an overall regulation. Next, please. This slide mentioned that we are, in the past, we also communicate or introduce what we call strategic communication awareness through several kinds of innovation communication platforms such as Facebook, the other kind of cartoon, leaflet, poster, and the other concert that we engage from the celebrity here you can see. And also for the children celebrity here to target a variety of citizens from children to adults. And we, from those kind of campaign, we got what we call around 10 million views from the social media, and we also this year we target to get another 5 million engagement from the social media on the strategic communication. Next slide, please. Stakeholder engagement. Okay. Stakeholder engagement. We in 2019 we gather around 130 participants who are represent what we call the institution or body that involved in the initiative to promote circular economy and fighting against plastic. And from that, we also target a few what we call circular economy leader platform, target the private sector like garment factory, wholesale, retail, and packaging, to restaurant and coffee shop. And the right hand side of what you can see here, 5 simple steps. These are the simple brochure that we are going to develop to engage with private sector in different private sector from restaurant. Here we see reduce plastic waste. So it's a simple way for them to see how they can join the government campaign and together with the other private sector who are willing to do the reduction of plastic from their source. Next, please. Also, from the previous presentation, Moiko mentioned that we have only less than 1% of plastic waste recycling formally. Also, it is important to identify the business model that can work for Cambodia. So it is important to build or find out the availability of alternate or business solution for the plastic waste recycling here in Cambodia. So based on this assessment, Cambodia will further supporting what we call pilot and scaling up the selected business intervention to increase the recycling business here and the main purpose to reduce the plastic waste. Next slide, please. One of the priority here is to deliver an effective implementation in the target city province here. We have a few targets from the capital city to the other coastal province, and we are also planning to start doing the scoping research to analyze the what we call West William and its composition from major source like hotel, factory, or the other kind of organization, so that from that we can come up with what we call the priority measure to promote the 4 O's in Cambodia, and specifically in the target provinces. And we plan to do the linking to the possible larger scale investment from abroad and locally to integrate waste management from the center to the recycling. And we have a few key players from the banks to the private sector here. And one of the key area that we are also consider that it is important is that building the capacity for the subnational level government, such as provinces, district, commune, who are the one who stay or work with the citizen is important. So we try to build their capacity in delivering the waste collection and waste, what we call the promotion to reduce the waste from the source, from the people. I think I end up with my last slide here. And next slide, please. We have a few partners from Sweden to Japan, the other organization, UNDP, and research as well. So we have a range of number of institutions who work with us, and we're also looking forward for a future cooperation with Cambodia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meng Anh and Moeko, also for that very interesting perspective of what's been happening in Cambodia. I'm going to ask just 2 quick questions because one also came up in the chat. Has there been any impact of COVID-19 on the overall projects or just on the way that things are happening? And it came from Leah asked the question in the chat box. And then secondly, part of this challenge as we're also looking at it, and maybe it'll be interesting to hear before also we move to the next presentation and Daniela talks about this, is what are the biggest challenges of bringing the private sector and government and other stakeholders together? So maybe just very quickly, if you can answer those 2 quick questions, just very quickly. Maybe we'll start with you, Meng Anh.
Thank you for the question. I think COVID is one key impact that every country is facing, and of course Cambodia is also facing this kind of challenges, and we are also have some countermeasure to tackle those impact. Like in case of like I mentioned, providing the capacity to the subnational level. Normally we have to go there directly or invite them to the capital city, but now due to the COVID situation, we invert this kind of action to do this kind of Zoom or online communication with them and providing technical support and other kind of support as well.
Okay, great. And maybe just the biggest challenge, Moeko, both from any of you, I mean, how to bring different partners together, correct? The private sector and the government to deal with this challenge is often, as we mentioned, a lot of finger pointing. How do you achieve greater collaboration also between partners to form part of the solution that is jointly tackled and build trust?
I think in Cambodian case, most of the private sector here, some of them, they are already doing their own initiative to tackle the plastic or waste in general. But for the government side here, for those who are not yet involved in this kind of what we call campaign, government, like I mentioned, we are trying to do some kind of platform to introduce their some kind of initiative and providing them let's say, for example, the certificate of recognition for those who are doing good in their own business, in introduce the waste from their business. So we provide this kind of recognition to them. So it's more like incentive to join us.
Yep. Okay. Mirka, anything just on the two issues, maybe from where you're sitting? It seems like a lot of partners are engaged. Anything that you're observing? What is the key to also building greater partnership and coalitions to address this issue?
Yes, I also want to answer your question about COVID the impacts. And we have seen that the impacts of COVID on the increased use of single-use plastic items, like for example, the mask, and also as well as the single-use food packaging items for delivery. So we also looking at in collaboration with ACLA, we are looking at what kind of solutions we can provide to promote delivery solution. And we also have seen that the significant impacts on the informal waste pickers, and because many borders are closed, they cannot sell the items to the neighboring country. So that the library have been heavily impacted. So we also provided the immediate relief packages for informal waste pickers, but we are also looking at the long-term strategy, how we can integrate informal waste pickers into circular economy models to lift their livelihood in the long term. And as for the private sector and other engagement strategies, so like we have in collaboration with ACLA, we have done a lot of research into the behavioral insight, why people face different challenges and issues in transition to more circular business model. One of the issues that coming up is convenience and cost. So we need to also think about how we can overcome these the barriers based on our research. And we are working with the government to unpack remove the perceived barriers to transition towards a circular economy model. Thank you. Great.
Thank you very much, Mirko. And then thank you also for those examples and how those are being addressed in Cambodia. It's very good to have that context and also the case study. So without further ado, let me also go to Daniela. Daniela represents also the Think Beyond Plastics and Think Beyond Cooperation initiative, also looking at innovation, specifically looking at the situation in the Philippines. So over to you, Daniela. I think you're muted, maybe just unmute.
Got it. Thank you, and greetings to everyone from California. I wanted to pick up on the last question. What are the challenges in engaging the private sector? And I'll start with this, but first the word about Think Beyond and Think Beyond Plastic. Think Beyond is an innovation accelerator developing a pipeline of innovation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The reason we're focused on this is because there is an enormous economic opportunity in achieving the SDGs. Some believe that it's almost 60 hotspots of innovation that is open and yet untapped, several $1 trillion. Our flagship project is Think Beyond Plastic. That's the first project we began to work on. And we've been at it for about 10 years now. We've launched numerous companies, numerous startups, and identified numerous innovation opportunities in alternatives to plastic or products, solutions, and product delivery systems that address the plastic pollution crisis. And so the next slide, please. What we've learned in the course of this 10 years of work is that it's very difficult to develop this type of innovation. And when I talk about innovation, I don't mean just systems innovation. I mean products and solutions. We work specifically in the area of new sustainable chemistry, new product delivery systems, delivering product without packaging, packaging design, and a little bit on recycling. It's less of interest to us because the industry is investing heavily in recycling infrastructure, and that's kind of the area that they represent really well. But the bridge to commercialization for these products is very, very long. And it has not one, but two valleys of death. And it begins oftentimes with innovation in an academic lab or in research setting. It starts with federal government grants and academic support and philanthropy. And then it goes through a journey that is very perilous and full of gaps. The first area is as soon as it gets out of university setting and it begins to journey towards commercialization, It's too early for industry to invest in it, and it's too early for traditional investors to put money into it. But it is also not of interest to universities and university grants anymore. So that is the early stage valley of death. And in that place, catalytic capital is needed to make the innovation successful beyond the proof of concept. And we're still talking about a very early stage. And then there is a second valley of death, which happens after the proof of concept during pilot stage. A need for scale-up capital is scarce and not particularly available. And this is where there is a huge difference between investments in North America and investments in Europe and Southeast Asia. In North America, there is more of a appetite for risk, and so there are more investors, but not so much interest in new materials. While in Europe and Southeast Asia, there is more interest in new materials, and partially investors such as GIZ and World Bank are encouraging these kind of investments, but less of a pipeline of innovation. So when we work a lot with industry, we represent their interests, we do innovation searches for them. And part of the problem in engaging big industry and big brands is there are no investments that are of interest to them that are at the readiness stage. And it's because this bridge to commercialization is so long. Next slide, please. So what we work on is the concept, the key success factors, what is required for these innovations to succeed. And there are three factors that are of greatest importance. The first one is the presence of the innovation ecosystem. So when we set out to work on our project in the Philippines, we started by first assessing where is the innovation ecosystem and what is its strength. So the innovation ecosystem is actually very important in developing these type of new products, solutions, and materials. It begins with demand creation. And everybody who is on this call today represents the demand creation engine. This is the need for solutions, the urgent need, and an economic opportunity in solving the problem of plastic pollution. It's usually driven by civil society and industry. That demand drives focused research and entrepreneurial system. So research in universities, research in new materials, but entrepreneurial engine creates new businesses and new opportunities that leverage this kind of research, early stage research. Then come the investors who put money into the early stage research or later more mature innovations. And of course, the policy landscape and policy instruments. Bans are important because they open up market for alternatives, but also policy instruments that encourage innovation and make it easier for entrepreneurs to set up businesses and to start these new opportunities. So we're looking at an innovation ecosystem that needs to be healthy, that needs to exist. And if any one of these components is underrepresented, then it doesn't create the right economic climate for innovation and for successful pipeline of innovation. And the next slide, please. The second factor that is really important is creating appropriate financing vehicles for the early stage of innovation. And this is a very common problem. Traditional investors who choose to put equity or to take equity in companies love to invest in a later stage of products, materials, solutions that have been de-risked. But if there is no early stage investment, there is no later stage investment. So this catalytic innovation is quite essential. This is a place for government to play, and this is a place for creative philanthropy to also participate in creating and de-risking this very early stage of innovation. So we work in that space as well to create a catalytic fund to support early stage development of green and sustainable chemistry, new product delivery systems, and new packaging design when it comes to plastics. The next slide, please. The next piece, the third piece that is really essential is the presence of acceleration and scale-up programs. It's very fashionable now to talk about the accelerators. There are 20,000 accelerators in North America alone. But when it comes to plastics and when it comes to new materials, packaging design, new product delivery systems, these accelerators often run out of steam and don't have the appropriate programs to support that kind of development. So working through partners, engaging these accelerators wherever they are locally, and creating the right program for the success of these businesses is essential. So we work with partners throughout the world to do that and scale up resources with global partners and industry. So we looked into all of these aspects when we started the project in the Philippines. The next slide, please, to see what is available, what local partners can we bring in. Next slide, please. And what areas are weak and where we need to kind of build up the infrastructure. And there are several key discoveries in the process. And by the way, we work globally, so this is not a new project for us. We have centers like this in North America. We're building one in Germany right now, and in Africa. So here's what we found out about the Philippines, and it was quite interesting. There is strong demand for solutions to plastic pollution in terms of products and delivery systems, but the focus tends to be more towards recycling. And the common mistake that's being made is that the circular economy is about recycling. The circular economy is not about recycling. Recycling is one part of it, but in order to facilitate successful recycling, we need new materials, because plastic material, when it gets recycled, increases the release of toxic chemicals. So the singular focus was on recycling in the Philippines, but there is great capacity to innovate. The government is very supportive of innovation, and there is great entrepreneurial spirit, which is all very good, because in countries with young talent and with an abundance of science talent and scientific universities and programs that produce these well-equipped resources, there is the capacity to innovate around new materials and sustainable chemistry and design, and also the great need to create jobs invested in this new opportunity, not jobs invested in recycling, which really is the past, but jobs created in and invested in the future, which is these new emerging opportunities. Job creation is a need and a must. Please let me finish that slide, please. The previous one. Jakob, yeah, thank you. Job creation is a must, and the previous slide, please. And COVID actually has exacerbated this need. With the collapse of tourism, there is a lot more need to create new opportunities and new jobs. And it really is important for us to decide as a society where these jobs will be created. Are we going to create the same old, dirty, polluted world, or are we going to create new jobs invested in green opportunities? And so creating this pipeline and creating these new jobs was important. The policy instruments needed diversification. There is a lot of interest in supporting innovation and entrepreneurship, but the policy instruments when it comes to plastics were primarily focused on encouraging recycling or banning certain products. And that, of course, was affected by COVID. So what we discovered is that while the government is really interested in supporting innovation and creating the right policy instruments, they need more guidance and advice about what policy instruments would support the development of new materials, green and sustainable chemistry, and new product delivery systems. And last but not least, certainly financing needs more diversity. And by that, I mean, there is traditional financing for startups in high tech, but there is less financing for startups in any other space. And that is a need. And creative financing that de-risks early stage innovation in plastic alternatives is very important. So a creative blend of philanthropy to de-risk this early stage with government supporting and de-risking that innovation, and traditional financing coming at the later stage. So with all of this, with this discovery, we worked on this for about 8 months. We created the concept of regional hub, and we're continuing to work with Alex and his team on this to kind of develop the concept and export it beyond just the Philippines. But the regional hub, the regional innovation hub, would fit very nicely with the circular economy concept for plastic solutions. It will focus on developing a complete innovation portfolio. So beyond recycling, what are the opportunities that emerge in solving the plastic pollution problem? It will focus research in universities and academic settings on problem solving in the area of sustainable chemistry. So when we talk about sustainable chemistry, we look into all these chemicals that are currently used, traditional chemicals that are used in creating plastic products. There is an alternative to these, which is not sufficiently researched and invested in, which is alternatives to the endocrine disrupting chemicals that are being used, or the toxic chemicals that are being used. And that is a widely open research opportunity and investment opportunity. The third piece the regional hub will deliver is resources, guidance, and innovation labs. One big gap that we have discovered the world over, it's not just in Southeast Asia, is that kind of innovation needs access to labs and lab equipment and place for prototyping and development, sometimes experimentation, end-of-life testing, and it does not exist. So we've created these resources around the world. We're working with GIZ and with the government in Germany to create a place like this for that part of the world. There is a resource that is needed in Southeast Asia, and we believe that the Philippines can host a regional hub with that capacity.
Daniela, I'm just conscious of...
Oh, okay. How much do I have?
You're over the time, so just if we can start wrapping up, please, that'll be great.
All right, let me just wrap up really quickly then. The policy instruments, industry guidance, and access to the global work is also going to be an asset to the regional hub. Let me just finish with the next slide, please. And so when we talk about the circular economy, I want to leave in your minds this concept. The circular economy is about services, not about products. It's delivering product as a service. So what that really means is it's about biobenign materials. It's about new materials that will facilitate this concept, and about green chemistry, because the materials that are subject to reuse cannot be traditional polluting dirty plastics. We need chemicals, we need new materials that have the capacity to go through the system and be used in multiple ways. A really important trend that was facilitated by COVID was the home delivery and e-commerce. And when home deliveries become the norm versus going in the store and picking out a product, packaging decisions also change. So it's no longer necessary to package things in plastic so they can be examined in the store by the consumer, but they need to be packaged for staying home delivery. So new packaging decision, new packaging design, and shortened supply chains are major economic factors that affect the innovation. And let me just skip to the next two slides. I just wanted to leave everybody with the contact information for us. The innovation opportunities for packaging, the innovation opportunities in product delivery, and how innovation is being sourced and from where. These are kind of very important considerations that the hub will take in mind. What you see here is basically the sources of innovation that come from academic labs, innovation challenges, industry partners, various accelerators and incubators. So there is no shortage of innovation. What is really important is to create the system to gather these innovation sources and guide them through a pathway to success. I know I am way over my time, so I want to give you the opportunity to ask me questions or reach out to us for more information. And on this, I will just wrap up. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Daniela. And I think we also very much appreciate that it takes a lot of time to explain through everything and all the complexity of the situation, but also just summarizing that in a very a good way to also better understand. And we'll capture some of that in the questions. There's already a couple of questions listed there. So last, before we get to the question, colleagues, and for those that have that want to raise your hands, please feel free to do that in the function. And also, I see some questions are already coming in. Please continue to do that. We will get to the questions after the brief, just short summary from Nick, who is our resident representative in Cambodia, and can also look at both from the UNDP perspective, what are both the development opportunities, but also the challenges to address this very complex situation. Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Jaco. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I mean, 4 fantastic presentations, and thank you to Alex and Toshikazu, Meng-Ying, Moiko, and Daniela. And I really, to do it in 5 minutes, I think I have 3 themes that can weave through these four presentations. I mean, the first theme for me was this idea of the engagement with the community, and that, you know, the people as the agents of change. And it came out in Alex's presentation, you know, that we don't involve the community enough. You know, when you talk about co-creation with who? You know, Daniela talked about it also in innovation as well, and reaching out to local communities. Community can be our superpower. That's the view I see, and that society, this ultimate complex adaptive system, if we can learn to listen and we can learn from communities, they can be a source of some of the best ideas that we can bring into addressing these issues. The second one, I think I would describe as seeing is believing. I think that, you know, curating systems that work, particularly at subnational level, can really be very effective. So Alex talked about Da Nang City in Vietnam, and we heard from Meng-Ying and Moiko about here in Cambodia, in Siem Reap, Sihanoukville, but also at subnational level. And if we can find some good practical examples and we can bring those examples up, I think that's going to help. And the reason I think that's going to be particularly important is this subject, I think, has a political problem, a little bit like climate change. You know, it's around the politics of despair, the politics of denial. It's such a huge problem that it tends to be the problem that is sort of put to one side as being too difficult to resolve. And I think budget allocations are going to be more readily available from government, but also maybe from private sector as well, if we can actually see on the ground some good examples. And so I think that subnational work is really important. And I think maybe the third bit I would say was maybe this, was maybe the obvious one is networks of agents. And this is really what we're doing tonight or this morning, depending on your time scale. And that's connecting regionally and globally, and sharing our ideas. But also, I think also I'd encourage people to share their failures as well. I think this is also a very important way about how we can learn about our development work. And Toshikazu's presentation, sharing, I think, for the examples from Japan about how we make connections both regionally and globally, and the way that Japan has made its investments to help make connections at a regional level, but also make connections within countries and making those bilateral programs, I think has been very effective. So I think that what we're doing today in terms of the way that we share these experiences is also a very important one. The last point I'd make on that is to pick up Jaco's point that yes, we can't really copy one solution and just plonk it into another country in a context. We know that doesn't work, but many of the inspirations or many of the points I think can spark off a new and different variant, and that's the way that we get to some interesting development outcomes. So I would say those three then from me, I would pick up from the four presentations. Community is our superpower, our way to develop solutions if we can learn to listen. Seeing is believing, and I think at subnational level, finding some really powerful examples that can help push the political agenda that we need to help solve this plastics problem. And then I think what we're doing tonight, this morning, depending where you are, these networks of agents, you know, this networking between us as development professionals, as innovators, private sector and government, coming together to share good ideas and practical examples and how we can best cooperate and work together. Jaakko, thanks. I'll leave it there.
Great, Nick, and I think that's really an excellent way of summarizing it. We can close just there, but there's also, as with these discussions, a lot of questions and people who also have raised excellent points, I think, in the area. So I'm actually going to cluster a little bit some of the questions together. So maybe first I'll come to Alex and to Daniela. And I'm just going to highlight 3 things that were raised in some questions. Like the one is around behavioral insights. How are behavioral insights used to also change community and you know, perspective, not only from communities, I think, but also from other actors, including private sector and government, and how is that effectively utilized maybe within the regional approach? And then also if you can highlight some of the areas around financing. The financing issue came up. How do we create the linkages with financing, and also what opportunities are opened up? And we always look to the private sector or to governments to do the big financing, but often community financing is just as important. So maybe let me start with those 2. I'll come to the other panelists a little bit later on. But Alex, maybe from you and Daniela first on those 2 topics. And just
thanks so much.
The responses relatively quick.
Yeah, okay. Sure. I think there are behavioral change. I think there are 2 important lines of work. I think the one is actually macro, right? So I think Nick excellently picked the line around building the local champions, right? So if we look from the behavioral perspective, yes, this is our usual traditional raising awareness, but seeing is believing is actually introducing new social norms, right? And if consumers are clearly having a critical part in changing the way what happens to plastic and to consumption overall, if we need to change the behavioral model, obviously this is the 2 components that we need to link together. Raising awareness and obviously seeing is believing. Seeing is believing, again, is important in what happens in the community. But when I alluded to portfolio approach, what is important, for instance, if government or someone invests in segregation infrastructure, it's very important that what happens to segregation infrastructure actually follows the segregated pathway and doesn't end up in the same landfill, right? So this is also seeing, and seeing is believing, right? There should be a trust between community and the government and other players for them to follow through the new social roles, right? And new social norms. So this is a critical thing. And obviously there is a tactical element in terms of behavioral insights, is just how we understand the particular behaviors of individuals, as in that example from Vietnam. For instance, in terms of introducing new segregation norms, how we tweak and make the infrastructure and processes, for instance, for waste collection and segregation convenient to users. The same applies to the work upstream. So that is my reflection on the behavioral part. The second one is about financing. And I think, again, what is really I'm seeing critical in our work, how we link those examples that are happening at the local level. Some of them are supported by seed funding from UNDP or other players. Some are taken by local champions who made it their own mission and doing kind of a frugal innovation without relying on grants and this usual kind of funding mechanism, introducing new practices. And this is where our role to scaling that. But the second element, I think, is how we link it to the bigger funding and policy agenda, right? So if we are looking, for instance, at the mission-driven development, how things around green procurement, grants from government, taxation can really change the models for consumption and for production, right? Just to give you one very simple example, when we did this work in Maldives, we discovered, and this is mostly importing country, we have all those small islands that import plastic, that their import taxation doesn't differentiate between sustainable or higher level plastic and low quality plastic that you can't recycle. A simple mechanism can actually change a lot of things on the ground in terms of funding and in terms of stimulating different type of norms and practices by the businesses. So I think one of the things for us is how we link the stuff at the local level with the higher level funding mechanisms in the public sector and private sector. Over to Daniela.
Great, Alex.
Yeah,
thanks.
thank you.
Maybe just
Thank you, Alex.
sorry, Daniela, not to repeat the question, because it's actually a very good specific question for you. So maybe you can focus on this one. Biziam asked, what about those plastics in the Philippines, which were not easy enough to be recycled? Example, PET bottles that, you know, have often, or those that have often multi-layer plastic use. How do you deal with those and some of those non-recyclable plastics, and how do you support that within the circular economy? Maybe within the framework that you presented, how are those, you know, those pain points or the difficult ones dealt with within that framework as well? So maybe if you can focus on that for us, Daniela.
Sure, and I will mention, I will reflect a little bit on the financing, because that's a very, very important point. With regards to the plastics that are not easy to be recycled, and that kind of goes along with the conversation about behavior change. There is a role for policy to reduce a plastic for which there is no recycling mechanism. There is no question about this. They should not be put in the marketplace. They should not be used. It's very difficult to find an alternative right now for multi-layer packaging, the packaging that is prevalent in a pollution analysis. And of course, that is the packaging that is the choice by industry: plastic film, multi-layer packaging. It's all the snacks. It's all the, you know, the little kind of very lightweight packaging shapes. There is no solution for this. So we're working really hard on coming up with an alternative to it, because behavior change is not possible without an alternative. There's got to be a way to support that behavior change by having a reasonable, commercially available alternative. And the other thing I wanted to mention here with regards to behavior changes, we're seeing a huge opportunity in tapping into the millennial generation. That kind of the new model of using plastics or reducing their use of plastics and using refillables is fantastic if you tap into millennials and kind of their green attitude. So the non-recyclable plastics, there is no place for them in the circular economy and in the current world we're building. With regards to financing, what I wanted to say is there is a great opportunity and largely untapped still for government financing and de-risking the early stage of innovation. You know, philanthropy is good and great, but philanthropy only goes that far. And what we're talking here is an opportunity for government to invest in these solutions and make it attractive for venture capital to come in at a later stage. And we're talking about financial institutions such as individual governments, community, World Bank. That is an opportunity for them to actually have transformative, to use the capital in a transformative way.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And thanks, Alex, also for that, for those insights. Toshikazu, I'm actually going to come to you because there was a specific question, and I don't know if you necessarily can answer it, but it was also with the experiences in Japan or your experiences maybe in working on the projects. Can you maybe just say how you're also using nature-based solutions to reduce plastic consumption? One is dealing with the end product and how do we do that, but the others is also how do we reduce some of this, both the consumption and the need for plastic. So maybe any examples there, Toshikazu-san, that you maybe want to highlight also, if there are any from Japan or from the project you're working on?
Yes, thank you very much for the questions. I think one of the simple solution for the question is introducing the EPR method, I think, extended producer responsibilities method. And in Japan, we have created a law represent the EPR method. For example, when the private company produce the plastic goods, the company have to be responsible for the recycling the goods when after the goods go through the consumers. So the products, the plastic products, when the consumer buy the products and use and then waste, and this the plastic goods have to be recycled in Japan. And for the finance for the recycling the plastic goods, for that, the company who produce the the private plastic goods have to pay for the recycling fee. So this is the law in Japan. So according to the law, we expect to create the financing for recycling plastic, and also we expect the private company not to produce the plastic goods, to make the organic, to use organic materials. They in private company in Japan. So this is one example of in Japan, but I think this system, EPR method, doesn't work well unless the people, the private sector's people and consumer agree to install this new system. If the people doesn't agree for the method, they don't follow anything. They don't follow the rules. They don't follow the system. So together with producing this method, EPR method, the awareness rising is the more important, I think, both for the people, citizens, and in the private sectors. So producing the method, I mean the technical method and the awareness rising the method together, developing together for these two methods, it's I think the one of the solutions for promoting the nature-based solutions. I think I hope this would be the answer for the questions. Thank you very much.
Toshikazu-san, thank you. That's good insights, and also how it is applied, specifically also in Japan. I'm going to come with two questions, maybe just to our Cambodia colleagues. So over to you, Mueko and Tang Meng. The first is just, have you noticed any increase in plastic waste during COVID-19 times? I know there's practical examples with the fall of oil prices, for instance. It becomes more difficult to recycle or for waste pickers to get the prices that they need for returning plastics and areas like that. So it also reduces the opportunities to pull back some of the plastics through some of these initiatives that many of us are working on. But have you seen any specific, maybe, dynamics as a result from COVID-19? We've asked that already, but have you seen an increase, maybe more specifically, and why that is? And then we also had a question from Budeka. Have you any national initiatives also to tackle microplastics? So maybe just on those two, I'm going to come maybe to Mueko and Tang Meng for a quick response.
Mr. Mengen, would you like to go first?
Okay. I think for Cambodia case, of course, we see some increasing of the plastic waste in Cambodia, or specifically for the capital city, because some of the situation that happen here, we are not having a very huge impact of COVID for a long period of time. Recently, we also have some kind of situation that we cannot go out, and I have to work from home during this week as well. So of course we have the increase of delivery of the food from outside to home, and for this we also see the increase of some campaign from the government, also from the private sector, the campaign to do the collection outside the residence, and this come out of the government and private sector joint hand initiative to provide the solution. Of course, we have the company who providing the waste collection service here in Phnom Penh, but we are in the transition to dividing. Of course, in Phnom Penh we have increasing size of the capital city, so the government is in the phase of considering to dividing the Phnom Penh waste collection coverage into 3 areas, and that will come an initiative that we will have the higher rate of waste collection coverage, and we also will incorporate some kind of recycling facility. We will have maybe 3 landfill. One would be the transferring station that will install the recycling facility there, and after the recyclable waste is take out, and then the last disposal waste will be transported to the regional landfill. This for the first question. The second one, I think Cambodia is still not yet in touch with the microplastic one, but we also in our consideration to do that as well. Moiko, you have any other comment on that?
I think you cover everything. Thank you.
Okay, great. So colleagues, there are still some fascinating questions that are coming in. You know, there's just a practical question about, yeah, we can reduce plastics and we can minimize the scale, but you know, has there been any thinking around replacing plastics, and where do we need to be on that? I mean, are we really just looking at addressing the continual causes of the situation, or is there a new way, of a transformative way of how we should also be looking and investing in new products and replacing plastic if possible? Those are big questions. I think just where we're sitting from, those are things that these processes, especially if you take it from a systems approach, doesn't just say that one initiative or one intervention is the solution. It says that this is addressing one and a certain part of the problem, but there are obviously much larger problems where both, you know, the companies, the chemical companies, you know, those that are producing plastic, but together with the governments, together with communities who are often facing the biggest challenges with plastic waste, but also the private sector needs to be constructively engaged with. And I think if you can map it and can understand the whole kind of solution chain, then it's also easier to say that, yes, there's a lot of initiatives. Some doesn't necessarily get at the big questions, but it does address certain parts of the ecosystem that also looks at the whole development challenges that needs to be addressed. We are very close to the end, so we're not going to get to all the questions, but I do want to just bring in Sulan. It was her child's birthday today, so that was a little bit of a maybe more priority. Sulan, just anything before we finalize that you just want to add, also maybe with regards to the whole plastic initiative that UNDP is working on at a global level, or what people can expect in the next webinar. Sulan, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jacob, for the excellent moderation, and many thanks to the distinguished panelists for your generous sharing of your ideas and your experiences and expertise, which have provided a lot of food for thoughts and inspiring ideas for us to prepare and finalize our plastics offer. Thank you so much, especially Mr. Tokioka, for sharing the Japanese strategy. I think Jacob raised a very critical question that a lot of colleagues here are very interested. I think it's important that we come up with a kind of a global vision and a coherent approach within UNDP so that we can move our team together. Many thanks to Mr. Entian to share the on-the-ground experiences with us. I think it's very, very important. I think a lot of colleagues have mentioned that it's critical that we base and design our solutions working closely and listen to communities. And it's important that we hear from you, the government colleagues working in the field, so that we are not losing our feet on the ground, and then we're connected. It's also very connected to the systems approach we have been we've been advocating. Thanks a lot, Alex, for outlining the methodology and how UNDP can implement this systems approach. And many thanks to Moiko for bringing the experiences in Cambodia, working very closely with government officials and the communities, informal sectors, and Daniela for sharing your expertise from a global NGO perspective. As Nick has mentioned, and I want to take Nick, I think your 3 excellent key points are sticking in my head. And a lot of the times you leave the webinar, you kind of feel like, okay, I had so many interesting ideas, but then after 1 day or 2, you kind of forgot the key messages. But I really like your 3 key messages you have outlined very powerfully. the communities are the superpowers. We need to listen to them. But another question I want to pose to you, the panelists here, and everyone, is that how do we, as a UNDP global system and a global family, how do we ensure and connect these points of actions are connected and move towards a global change and transformational change? How do we ensure that our activities at the global, regional, and the local level and community levels are connected and speak to each other? And we all know that the plastic solution, there's no one size fits all. And how do we, but UNDP is uniquely positioned to design these local actions because of the local based nature we have. The challenge I have, for instance, from sitting in headquarters, is that before I take on the lead of the task force, I even don't know, what the other parts of the world are doing in different outside of small grants program. And this is the first time that we bring our global family together and share the experience. I hope that you can help us to build this connectivity and networking stronger and better. And the second, your key message is seeing is believing, Nick. I really like it, because I think you can't just do the reports and publications and boom, hoping that things will change. I like to add one more kind of motto here. I think doing is changing. So I think a lot of the problem, the times, is that we do a lot of methodology reports, but the policies also, according to the World Resource Institute report, 127 countries have some kind of plastic bans and regulations. However, the implementation is not adequate. So to think about, I think based on the experiences we have from small grants program, if we bring the prime ministers and the ministers down to clean up the communities, together with communities, imagine the power of that. We have seen the success in Rwanda. Of course, it's not a one-time cleanup. It has to be routine, consistent, weekly cleanup, so that you make people clean up, they will change the behaviors. I think doing is changing. And the third point you mentioned is the network of agents. I think this is a fantastic, it's a great privilege to work with you all and to be part of the agents of the change. And I like to really, I think we got inspiration from each other, knowing that they are colleagues working on the same topic. So a challenge to everyone is that how do we go about, after leaving this network and this platform, to build our own other network that will be connected globally. With that, thank you, colleagues. Jacob, it's been quite a lengthy intervention from me, but I really got so inspired and motivated by all of your amazing contribution and your energy that you have brought to the Global Plastics offer. Thanks to my team here, the Plastics Task Force, especially Mira and Martin and Emerald, who have organized this webinar. I really look forward to continue the conversation. Of course, the 100 other colleagues whose name I don't know. I think this is an amazing network that we need to continue and strengthen as we go forward. Thank you, Jacob. Over to you.
Thank you, Sulan. And I'm not going to say much more. We're conscious that it's over 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock here for colleagues here in Asia Pacific. So thank you. A great summary. Thank you again to both the panelists, but also the participants. This is a journey of learning and discovery and improving. And I think that's what we want to do. And we don't have a lot of time. We want to do it as quickly as possible. So we look also forward to other sessions. So from our side, thank you very much to everybody. And we look also part of you being part of the solution as we move forward. So good morning, good afternoon, and a good evening to everybody. And thanks for joining the session. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.